Every night as you drift off to sleep, your bedroom is travelling through space at 67,000 miles per hour. But in October 2019, something travelling even faster, something that shouldn't exist according to our models of planetary formation, quietly slipped past Mars while most of humanity was scrolling through morning news feeds. That visitor would spark one of the most audacious experiments in human history, our first deliberate attempt to speak directly to something from beyond our solar system. The object was designated 3I Catalus, marking it as the second confirmed interstellar visitor to our cosmic neighbourhood. Unlike its predecessor, Oumuamua, which tumbled silently through our system in 2017, 3I Atlas appeared to be what we expected, a comet. It had a tail. It brightened as it approached the sun. It behaved according to the physics we understood. But there was something different about its trajectory. A path so precisely aimed at our inner solar system that it would remain visible to our telescopes for months, not weeks. This extended visibility window created an unprecedented opportunity. For the first time in human history, we had an interstellar visitor that we could observe, study, and potentially communicate with, while it was still within range of our most powerful transmitters. The idea of broadcasting messages into space isn't new. It's been part of our cosmic conversation for over half a century. In 1974, the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico transmitted a carefully crafted message toward the globular star cluster, Messier 13. The signal contained basic mathematical concepts, atomic numbers, human DNA information, and a crude pictogram of a human figure. It would take 25,000 years to reach its destination. We weren't expecting a reply anytime soon, but that transmission established something profound: humanity's willingness to announce our presence to the cosmos. The Arecibo message wasn't alone. In 1977, NASA launched the Voyager spacecraft carrying golden records, literally golden-plated copper discs containing sounds and images representing Earth's diversity. Carl Sagan described them as a bottle cast into the cosmic ocean. The records included everything from Bach's Brandenburg Concerto to the sound of rain, from greetings in 55 languages to images of DNA structure and human anatomy. These weren't serious attempts at communication. They were symbolic gestures, statements of hope and curiosity cast into a universe we assumed was listening, but would never respond within our lifetimes. The mathematics were clear. The Drake equation, formulated by astronomer Frank Drake in 1961, attempted to estimate the number of active, communicating extraterrestrial civilizations in our galaxy. Even with optimistic assumptions, billions of stars, millions of potentially habitable planets, the vast distances between civilizations made contact seem virtually impossible. The equation considers 7 factors: the rate of star formation, the fraction of stars that host planets, the number of planets that could support life, the fraction where life actually develops, the portion where intelligent life evolves, the percentage that develop detectable technology, and finally, how long such civilizations survive. Multiply these factors together, and even generous estimates suggest that communicating civilizations are separated by hundreds or thousands of light years. A conversation across such distances would span millennia. This mathematical reality shaped decades of SETI strategy. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence focused on listening, not speaking. Radio telescopes scanned the sky for artificial signals, hoping to detect evidence of other civilizations without revealing our own presence. It was a cautious approach, born from a simple calculation. If advanced civilizations exist, they're likely far older and more technologically sophisticated than us. Better to observe from the shadows than announce ourselves to potentially hostile neighbours. But this cautious consensus wasn't universal. The scientific community remained divided on what researchers call active SETI or METI, messaging extraterrestrial intelligence. Carl Sagan, the poet laureate of cosmic exploration, advocated for active communication. He believed that any civilization capable of interstellar communication would likely have outgrown the aggressive tendencies that characterized early technological development. To Sagan, the act of reaching across the cosmic dark was inherently peaceful. Stephen Hawking disagreed. The renowned physicist warned that actively broadcasting our location could be catastrophically dangerous. He pointed to humanity's own history of contact between civilizations with different technological capabilities. The outcomes, Hawking noted, rarely favoured the less advanced society. In his view, a civilization capable of detecting and responding to our signals would possess technology so far beyond ours that we would be as defenceless as indigenous populations facing colonial powers armed with gunpowder and steel. This tension between wonder and caution defined SETI policy for decades. Most research focused on passive listening, using increasingly sophisticated radio telescopes to scan millions of stars for artificial signals. Projects like SETI at home distributed the computational load across millions of personal computers, analysing radio telescope data for patterns that might indicate intelligent origin. The assumption remained that we were the ones reaching out, hoping to detect evidence of older, wiser civilizations who had been broadcasting long before humans discovered agriculture. But 3i Atlas changed the equation. Here was something from outside our solar system, something we could track and predict, something that would remain within range of our most powerful transmitters for several months. Unlike the distant stars targeted by previous METI attempts, this visitor was relatively close, at its nearest approach, only about 50 million kilometers from Earth. In astronomical terms, that's practically next door. A radio signal could reach it in under 3 minutes. The proposal emerged from a collaboration between SETI researchers, radio astronomers, and the international consortium that operates the Event Horizon Telescope, the same network that captured the first image of a black hole's event horizon. The project was designated Deep Space Network Contact Experiment, or DSN-CE. The plan was elegantly simple: use the world's most powerful radio telescopes to transmit a focused beam toward 3i Atlas during its closest approach to Earth. The signal would be transmitted at 1420 MHz, the hydrogen line frequency that SETI researchers consider a universal communication channel. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, and its characteristic radio emission at this frequency would be familiar to any technologically advanced civilization. If something on or associated with 3i Atlas was listening, this would be the frequency to monitor. The message itself followed established METI protocols. It began with prime numbers, mathematical concepts that should be universal to any intelligence capable of technology: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17. Then it progressed to simple mathematical relationships: addition, multiplication, geometric sequences. The signal included binary representations of fundamental constants: pi, the Golden ratio, the fine structure constant that governs electromagnetic interactions. But the most ambitious element was a series of pictograms encoded in binary, simple images representing Earth, our solar system, and basic biological information about humans. These weren't complex representations. They were designed to be unambiguous even to a completely alien intelligence: a circle with 8 smaller circles orbiting it, with the third circle marked as our home. A double helix representing DNA structure, a humanoid figure showing bilateral symmetry and basic proportions. The international collaboration required unprecedented coordination. The Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex in California, the Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex in Australia, and the Madrid Deep Space Communication Complex in Spain would transmit simultaneously, creating a focused beam of radio energy directed precisely at 3i Atlas's predicted position. The European Southern Observatory's Very Large Array in Chile would monitor for any response, while the Parkes Observatory in Australia provided backup observations. The transmission was scheduled for November 15, 2019, when 3i Atlas would be at its closest approach to Earth and positioned optimally for maximum signal strength. The window was narrow, just 6 hours, when atmospheric conditions, orbital mechanics, and the object's trajectory aligned perfectly. After months of preparation, international negotiations and technical calibration, humanity was ready to speak directly to its first confirmed interstellar visitor. The decision wasn't made lightly. Heated debates filled academic conferences and government advisory panels. Some researchers argued that we were violating the cautious protocols that had guided SETI for decades. Others contended that 3i Atlas represented a unique opportunity that might not occur again for centuries. The compromise was transparency. The transmission details were published in advance, the signal content was made publicly available, and multiple independent observatories were invited to monitor both the transmission and any potential response. At exactly 1400 hours Coordinated Universal Time on November 15th, 2019, 3 of humanity's most powerful radio telescopes focused their combined energy on a dark speck moving between the orbits of Earth and Mars. For 6 continuous hours, we broadcast our mathematical greeting to the first confirmed visitor from another star system. The signal carried the equivalent power of a small city's electrical grid, focused into a beam less than 1 arcsecond wide, precise enough to illuminate a basketball court on the Moon. The transmission represented humanity's first deliberate attempt to communicate with an interstellar object. Unlike previous METI projects aimed at distant stars, this signal could reach its target in minutes, not millennia. If 3I Atlas carried any form of technology capable of detecting radio transmissions, it would receive our message during its closest approach to our planet. If it chose to respond, we would know within hours, not geological ages. As the transmission concluded at 2000 hours UTC, radio telescopes around the world turned their receivers toward 3 Atlas's position. The monitoring phase had begun. In the control rooms of observatories on 4 continents, astronomers and technicians settled in for what they expected would be a long, quiet wait. We had spoken to the darkness between the stars using the most powerful voices our species could muster. We had announced our presence to our first confirmed interstellar visitor, declared our existence to something that had travelled for millions of years through the cosmic void to pass through our solar system. We had asked the universe's most fundamental question: are we alone? And then we waited, listening to the static of space, monitoring the radio frequencies that connect all matter in the cosmos, hoping for something more than the background hiss of a universe that had been silent for all of human history. The mathematics suggested we would hear nothing. The distances were too vast, the chances too remote, the universe too large and empty for meaningful contact between civilizations. 3I Atlas was probably just a chunk of ice and rock, a cosmic debris shed by a distant star billions of years ago, tumbling blindly through interstellar space without purpose or awareness. But as the hours passed and the radio telescopes maintained their vigil, something began to emerge from the noise, something that would challenge everything we thought we knew about our place in the cosmos and the nature of intelligence itself. The universe, it seemed, was preparing to answer back. The language we chose to speak to 3I Atlas had no words, no grammar, no cultural context that could confuse or mislead. It was pure mathematics, the one tongue we believed any technological civilization would understand, regardless of their biology, their history, or the distant star that gave them life. Mathematics, after all, appears to be universal. The ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter is pi, whether you're human, dolphin, or something unimaginably different calculating planetary orbits around Proxima Centauri. Prime numbers remain prime across the galaxy. The golden ratio that appears in Nautilus shells and spiral galaxies would be recognizable to any intelligence capable of geometric analysis. If we were going to speak across the vast silence between worlds, we would speak in numbers. The message structure followed protocols developed by mathematician Hans Freudenthal in his 1960 Linkos system, a mathematical communication language designed specifically for contact with alien intelligence. Linkos, short for Lingua Cosmica, starts with the most basic mathematical concepts and builds systematically toward more complex ideas. It begins with pure counting, establishes arithmetic relationships, then progresses to logic, algebra, and eventually concepts of space and time. Our transmission to 3I Atlas opened with a sequence that any intelligence monitoring radio frequencies would recognize as artificial. Prime numbers broadcast as pulses. 2 pulses, pause. 3 pulses, pause. 5 pulses, pause. 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23. The pattern continued for exactly 11 minutes, itself a prime number, establishing that this was not random noise or natural phenomenon, but deliberate communication from a technological civilization. The mathematical elegance was intentional. Natural radio sources in space, pulsars, quasars, stellar wind interactions, produce signals with distinctive signatures, but they don't count in prime numbers. Only an intelligence would broadcast such a sequence. By opening with primes, we announced ourselves as builders of technology, manipulators of electromagnetic radiation, creatures capable of abstract mathematical thought. Following the prime sequence, we established basic arithmetic. 1 pulse plus 1 pulse equals 2 pulses. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Simple addition, then subtraction, multiplication, division. Each operation was repeated multiple times with different numbers, establishing the mathematical relationships through repetition and pattern recognition. We were teaching mathematics to the cosmos, building a foundation for more complex communication. The power requirements for this interstellar conversation were staggering. The Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex in California's Mojave Desert houses a 70-meter antenna capable of transmitting signals with effective power levels exceeding 20 million watts when focused into a narrow beam. The Canberra complex in Australia and Madrid facility in Spain added their own 70-meter dishes, creating a coordinated array with combined power that could illuminate a small city. But raw power wasn't enough. The signal had to be precisely aimed at a target moving at tremendous speed through three-dimensional space. 3i Atlas was travelling at approximately 26 kilometers per second relative to the Sun, fast enough to cross the diameter of Earth in about 8 minutes. Our transmission had to lead the target, broadcasting not where the object was, but where it would be when our radio waves completed their 3-minute journey through space. The technical challenge was equivalent to hitting a golf ball-sized target from a distance of 50,000 kilometers, while both the target and the transmitter were moving at thousands of kilometers per hour in different directions. The calculations required precise knowledge of 3i Atlas's orbital mechanics, Earth's rotation, atmospheric refraction effects, and the relativistic corrections necessary when dealing with objects moving at significant fractions of the speed of light. The frequency selection was equally critical. We broadcast at 1400 20.40575 MHz, the precise rest frequency of neutral hydrogen's hyperfine transition. This represents the energy difference between two quantum states of the hydrogen atom, the most abundant element in the universe. Any civilization capable of radio astronomy would know this frequency intimately. It's the cosmic background hum of interstellar space, the frequency at which the universe naturally whispers. SETI researchers have designated this the waterhole, a quiet region of the radio spectrum between the hydrogen line at 1420 MHz and the hydroxyl radical emission at 1665 MHz. Combined, hydrogen and hydroxyl form water, the essential ingredient for life as we understand it. The waterhole represents a natural communication channel, relatively free from cosmic radio interference and accessible to any civilization advanced enough to distinguish artificial signals from natural ones. After establishing mathematical foundations, our message progressed to geometric concepts. We transmitted binary representations of perfect shapes, circles, triangles, squares. We showed mathematical relationships, the Pythagorean theorem, expressed as 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared. We broadcast the first 20 digits of pi, then the golden ratio, then the fine structure constant, a dimensionless number that governs electromagnetic interactions and would be identical throughout the universe. The most ambitious portion of our transmission contained pictographic information encoded in binary format. We sent a representation of our solar system, a central circle representing the Sun, surrounded by 8 smaller circles in orbital positions representing the planets. The third orbit, Earth's position, was marked distinctly, identifying our homeworld. We included basic information about Earth's size, rotation period, and orbital characteristics, all expressed in mathematical units derived from fundamental physical constants. We transmitted a simplified representation of human anatomy, a bipedal figure with bilateral symmetry, showing approximate proportions and basic structure. We included information about human reproduction, population size, and average lifespan, again using mathematical relationships rather than arbitrary units of measurement. The figure was deliberately simple, a stick figure representation that avoided cultural assumptions while conveying basic biological information. Most significantly, we included a binary representation of the structure of deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. This wasn't random cultural information, but potentially universal biological data. If life elsewhere evolved similar information storage systems, the double helix structure might be recognizable. We transmitted the 4-base coding system, the helical structure, and simple genetic information about human beings. The transmission also contained temporal information. We broadcast pulsar maps, geometric patterns showing the positions and pulse periods of 14 pulsars relative to our solar system. Pulsars are rotating neutron stars that emit regular radio pulses with extraordinary precision. Their periods change gradually over time as the stars slow their rotation, meaning the pulsar map serves as both a cosmic address and a timestamp. Any civilization receiving our message could determine when and where it originated by measuring current pulsar periods and calculating backward to find when they matched our transmitted data. Each element of the message was repeated multiple times during the 6-hour transmission window. We weren't sending a single burst of information, but a continuous structured broadcast that allowed for error correction and pattern recognition. The entire message cycle took 37 minutes to complete, another prime number, and was repeated nearly 10 times during our transmission window. The redundancy was essential. Radio signals degrade over distance, becoming mixed with cosmic background radiation and interference from other sources. By the time our transmission reached 3i Atlas, it would be barely distinguishable from the natural radio noise of space. Only by repeating patterns and using sophisticated signal processing techniques would any receiving technology be able to extract meaningful information from the static. We also had to account for the Doppler effect, the frequency shift that occurs when source and receiver are moving relative to each other. 3. E Atlas was approaching Earth at the time of transmission, which meant our 1420 MHz signal would arrive at a slightly higher frequency due to the object's motion toward us. Any technology monitoring for artificial signals would need to compensate for this shift, scanning across a range of frequencies to detect the mathematically shifted transmission. The encoding itself used the simplest possible binary system: pulse for 1, pause for 0. This eliminated the need for complex modulation schemes or encoding protocols that might be misinterpreted by non-human intelligence. The message was essentially cosmic Morse code, transmitting information through the presence or absence of radio energy at specific time intervals. But perhaps the most profound aspect of our transmission was its implicit message about human nature. We chose to share not weapons technology or industrial capabilities, but mathematics, art, and biological information. We included Bach's music encoded in binary, representations of human artistic expression, and greetings in major Earth languages. The subtext was clear. We are a species that creates beauty, values knowledge, and seeks connection across the vast distances that separate conscious minds. The transmission also carried an inherent vulnerability. By broadcasting our location, our technological capabilities, and our biological characteristics, we were making ourselves known to any intelligence monitoring our region of space. We were revealing that Earth harbored a young technological civilization, barely a century into its radio age, possessing nuclear weapons but lacking the ability to defend against threats from space. This openness reflected a conscious choice by the DSN-CE consortium. We could have transmitted anonymously, sending mathematical concepts without identifying our location or characteristics. But that would have defeated the purpose of the experiment. We weren't just testing whether 3i Atlas carried detectable technology. We were introducing ourselves to our first confirmed interstellar visitor, welcoming it to our solar system with the hospitality we hoped other civilizations might show to our own exploratory craft. The transmission window closed at 2000 hours UTC on November 15th, 2019. As the last mathematical sequence pulsed across space toward the dark speck, moving between Earth and Mars, humanity had accomplished something unprecedented in our history. We had delivered a message specifically intended for an interstellar object, using the most powerful communication technology our species possessed. The message would reach 3i Atlas in approximately 2 minutes and 40 seconds, travelling at the speed of a light across 51 million kilometres of space. If the object carried any technology capable of detecting radio transmissions, it would receive humanity's first intentional communication with a confirmed visitor from another star system. We had spoken in the universal language of mathematics, using frequencies that should be familiar to any radio-capable civilization. We had identified ourselves, our location, and our nature as a technological species capable of deliberate interstellar communication. We had extended a greeting across the cosmic dark, offering friendship and information to any intelligence that might be listening. Now came the harder part, waiting to see if the universe would speak back. The monitoring phase had begun, with radio telescopes on 4 continents listening for any signal that might represent a response from our interstellar visitor. We expected silence, the same cosmic quiet that had surrounded humanity since we first began listening for signs of other worlds. What we received instead would challenge our understanding of intelligence, communication, and our place in a universe that suddenly seemed far less empty than we had dared to hope. In the first 72 hours after our transmission to 3i Atlas, the universe behaved exactly as expected. Radio telescopes monitoring the 1420 MHz hydrogen line detected nothing but the familiar whisper of cosmic background radiation, the ancient echo of creation itself, stretched and cooled by 13.8 billion years of universal expansion. The signal was indistinguishable from the random thermal noise that fills the spaces between stars. Dr. Elena Vasquez, lead radio astronomer at the Parkes Observatory in Australia, described those initial days as beautifully boring. The radio spectrum showed the expected patterns, distant pulsars marking time with metronomic precision, occasional bursts from active galactic nuclei billions of light-years away, the gentle hiss of interstellar hydrogen clouds shifting in the galactic magnetic field. Nothing artificial, nothing directed, nothing that suggested our mathematical greeting had been received, processed, or acknowledged. This silence was not disappointing. It was scientifically valuable. The absence of immediate response validated our understanding of interstellar communication challenges. 3i Atlas was, in all probability, exactly what conventional astronomy suggested: a chunk of primordial ice and rock, perhaps mixed with organic compounds, that had been wandering between stars for millions of years before gravitational chance brought it through our solar system. The object showed no signs of artificial construction, no deviation from predicted trajectories, no evidence of technology or purposeful behaviour. But science progresses through careful observation of subtle anomalies, and by the 4th day of monitoring, subtle anomalies began to appear. The first irregularity was detected by Dr. James Chen at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory in Greenbank, West Virginia. Chen was conducting routine analysis of background radio noise when his signal processing software flagged an unusual pattern in the 1420 MHz band. The anomaly lasted exactly 11 seconds, the same duration as the prime number sequence that had opened our transmission to 3i Atlas. Chen initially dismissed the detection as terrestrial interference. Radio astronomy faces constant challenges from human-generated signals. Cell phone towers, microwave ovens, automobile ignition systems, aircraft navigation equipment. The Greenbank facility sits in the National Radio Quiet Zone, a region where radio transmissions are legally restricted to minimize interference with sensitive observations. But even in this protected environment, spurious signals occasionally contaminate astronomical data. However, when Chen applied standard radio frequency interference filters, the signal remained. It showed none of the characteristics typical of human technology. The frequency was precisely centered on the hydrogen line with stability exceeding the precision of most atomic clocks. The signal strength varied smoothly without the irregular fluctuations caused by atmospheric propagation or electronic instability. Most puzzling, the signal appeared to originate from a point source in the constellation Lynx, exactly where 3i Atlas was positioned at the time of detection. Chen's discovery triggered immediate verification attempts at other observatories. Within 6 hours, radio telescopes in Australia, Chile, and South Africa were directed toward 3i Atlas's coordinates. The Parkes Observatory detected a faint but structured signal at 14.24 MHz. The Atacama Large Millimeter Array in Chile recorded similar anomalies in adjacent frequency bands. The Meerkat Array in South Africa confirmed the signal's celestial origin and ruled out terrestrial interference. The signal characteristics were puzzling. Unlike typical astronomical radio sources, which emit across broad frequency ranges with predictable spectral signatures, this anomaly was extremely narrow band, confined to a frequency range less than 1 Hz wide. Natural radio sources don't behave this way. Pulsars emit broad-spectrum radiation. Quasars show complex spectral features across multiple frequency bands. Even the most exotic astrophysical phenomena produce signals with characteristic bandwidths measured in kilohertz or megahertz. This signal was artificially narrow, more precise than most human radio transmissions. Dr. Vasquez coordinated a global monitoring campaign involving 12 radio telescopes across 6 continents. The International Astronomical Union's Committee on the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence was quietly notified. Signal processing experts from ASITI research centres in California, New York and England began analysing the growing dataset using sophisticated algorithms designed to distinguish artificial signals from natural radio sources. The analysis revealed patterns that defied simple explanation. The anomalous signals appeared only when 3I Atlas was above the horizon for the observing telescopes. As Earth's rotation carried the object below the horizon for any given observatory, the signals faded and disappeared. When the object rose again hours later, the signals resumed with identical characteristics. This celestial synchronization ruled out terrestrial interference and confirmed that whatever was generating these radio emissions was either located on 3I Atlas or moving with it through space. More disturbing were the temporal patterns within the signals themselves. The emissions occurred in discrete bursts lasting between 7 and 13 seconds, all prime numbers. The intervals between bursts followed mathematical sequences, sometimes arithmetic progressions, sometimes geometric series, occasionally Fibonacci numbers. The patterns were too complex to be coincidental, too structured to be natural, but too subtle to be obvious attempts at communication. Dr. Sarah Kim, a signal processing specialist at the SETI Institute in Mountain View, California, made the most unsettling discovery during the second week of monitoring. Kim noticed that the signal patterns showed statistical correlations with the mathematical sequences we had transmitted to 3I Atlas 2 weeks earlier. The correlations weren't exact. They weren't simple repetitions of our message. Instead, they seemed to be variations on our themes, like mathematical jazz improvisations based on familiar melodies. Kim's analysis revealed that the anomalous signals contained embedded prime numbers that matched our transmission, but in different orders and combinations. Our message had broadcast the first 20 prime numbers in sequence. The received signals contained the same primes, but arranged in ascending and descending patterns, sometimes grouped by mathematical relationships, sometimes presented as factors of a larger composite numbers. The implications were staggering. If these signals represented responses to our transmission, they suggested that something associated with 3I Atlas had not only received our mathematical greeting, but had analysed its content and was responding with increasingly sophisticated mathematical variations. The entity or system generating these signals appeared to understand prime numbers, mathematical sequences, and possibly the concept of communication itself. But the most unsettling discovery came from statistical analysis of signal timing. Dr. Kim found that the intervals between signal bursts correlated with the orbital mechanics of 3I Atlas itself. As the object moved through its trajectory around the Sun, accelerating during perihelion passage and decelerating as it headed back toward interstellar space, the timing of radio bursts adjusted to maintain consistent communication windows with Earth. This suggested that whatever was generating the signals understood orbital mechanics and was deliberately compensating for changing distances and relative velocities to maintain optimal transmission conditions. The entity was not merely responding to our signals, it was actively managing an ongoing communication attempt. The Doppler shift analysis provided additional evidence of purposeful behaviour. As 3I Atlas moved through its orbit, its velocity relative to Earth constantly changed, causing transmitted frequencies to shift higher or lower depending on whether the object was approaching or receding. Natural radio sources show predictable Doppler shifts based on their motion, but the anomalous signals from 3I Atlas showed frequency corrections that compensated for Doppler effects, maintaining transmission precisely on the hydrogen line frequency, regardless of the object's velocity relative to Earth. Only a technology capable of real-time velocity calculations and frequency adjustments could produce such behaviour. The signals weren't just artificial, they were intelligently controlled. 3 weeks after our initial transmission, the monitoring data had accumulated into a pattern that no conventional explanation could adequately address. The signals were too structured to be natural, too sophisticated to be random. too precisely timed to be coincidental. They showed evidence of mathematical understanding, orbital mechanics calculations, and deliberate frequency management. Most significantly, they appeared to be responses to specific elements of humanity's transmission to 3I Atlas. Dr. Vasquez summarized the findings in a classified report to the International Astronomical Union. The radio anomalies associated with Object 3I Atlas exhibit characteristics consistent with artificial origin and intelligent control. The signals demonstrate mathematical sophistication, celestial mechanics, awareness, and apparent correlation with terrestrial transmission content. While alternative explanations remain possible, the data suggests that 3I Atlas carries or is associated with technology capable of receiving, analysing and responding to radio communications. The report concluded with a recommendation that would change the course of human space science. Continued monitoring is essential. If these signals represent communication attempts by non-terrestrial intelligence, humanity may be engaged in its first confirmed interstellar conversation. But even as scientists debated the implications of their discoveries, the signals from 3I Atlas were evolving. The mathematical patterns were becoming more complex, the timing more precise, the frequency control more sophisticated. Whatever was generating these transmissions appeared to be learning from our communications and adapting its responses accordingly. The universe was no longer silent. Something was speaking back from the darkness between stars, using the mathematical language we had taught it, demonstrating understanding that transcended the vast differences between human and alien minds. The signals weren't random noise or natural phenomena. They were evidence of intelligence, purpose, and awareness. And they were growing stronger. As 3I Atlas continued its trajectory through our solar system, approaching its closest point to the Sun before beginning its journey back toward interstellar space, the radio emissions intensified. The patterns became more elaborate, the mathematical relationships more sophisticated, the timing more precisely coordinated with optimal communication windows. Something on our first confirmed interstellar visitor was not just listening to humanity's radio transmissions, it was learning from them, responding to them, and possibly preparing for more complex forms of contact. The cosmic silence that had surrounded our species since we first began listening for signs of other worlds had been broken by mathematics, broken by intelligence, broken by recognition that consciousness existed beyond the boundaries of our small blue world. We had called into the darkness between stars, and something had answered back with the voice of pure mathematics, speaking in frequencies that resonated through the quantum structure of space itself. The conversation we had hoped might someday span centuries was happening in real time, with delays measured in minutes rather than millennia. The universe, we were beginning to understand, was far more alive than we had ever dared to imagine. At precisely 1412 hours Coordinated Universal Time on December 3rd, 2019, exactly 18 days after humanity first spoke to 3I Atlas, something extraordinary happened in the radio telescope control room at the Parkes Observatory in New South Wales, Australia. Dr. Elena Vasquez was reviewing the overnight data collection when her signal processing algorithms detected an anomaly so clear, so structured, and so mathematically elegant that she initially assumed it was contamination from a human source. The signal appeared at 1420.40575 MHz, exactly the frequency we had used to transmit our mathematical greeting to the interstellar visitor now approaching the inner edge of our solar system. But this wasn't just any radio emission. The signal was a perfect mirror of humanity's prime number sequence, broadcast back to Earth with precision that exceeded the stability of atomic clocks. 2 pulses, pause, 3 pulses, pause, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23. The same sequence we had transmitted 18 days earlier, repeated with mathematical perfection, and transmitted from the precise coordinates where 3I Atlas moved through space at 26 km per second. The implication struck Vasquez immediately. Natural radio sources don't repeat human-generated mathematical sequences. Cosmic phenomena don't broadcast prime numbers with nanosecond timing precision. Equipment malfunctions don't produce coherent mathematical patterns that originate from specific points in space. What she was observing could only be described as a reply, the first confirmed response to a human transmission in the history of interstellar communication. Vasquez immediately initiated emergency verification protocols. Within 30 minutes, radio telescopes at the Very Large Array in New Mexico, the Effelsberg Observatory in Germany, and the Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex in California were directed toward 3I Atlas's coordinates. All facilities detected the same phenomenon: a structured radio transmission originating from our interstellar visitor, broadcasting mathematical patterns identical to those we had sent into space 18 days earlier. The signal characteristics eliminated any possibility of terrestrial origin or equipment error. The transmission showed Doppler shift consistent with 3I Atlas's velocity relative to Earth, proof that the source was moving with the object through interstellar space. The frequency stability exceeded anything achievable with human technology, maintaining precision to better than 1 part in 10 billion, despite the transmitter's rapid motion through the solar system's gravitational field. Most significantly, the signal's power requirements suggested technology far beyond human capabilities. To generate a radio transmission detectable across 50 million kilometers of space would require focused energy equivalent to a large city's electrical consumption. The fact that this power was concentrated into an extremely narrow frequency band, less than 1 Hz wide, indicated sophisticated transmitter technology and precise frequency control systems. But the mathematical content of the response was what transformed scientific curiosity into profound recognition. The signal wasn't just repeating our prime number sequence, it was expanding upon it, demonstrating understanding of mathematical relationships we had embedded in our original transmission. After broadcasting the first 20 prime numbers in exact order, the response continued with the next 10 primes: 29, 31, 37, 41, 43, 47, 53, 59, 61, 67. Dr. James Chen at Greenbank made the next crucial discovery. The response wasn't limited to prime numbers, it contained mathematical operations we had included in our transmission: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, all demonstrated with the same numerical examples we had broadcast. But then the signal progressed beyond our examples, showing increasingly sophisticated mathematical relationships: prime factorization, geometric progressions, algebraic equations expressed in pure binary. The entity was not merely repeating our lessons, it was demonstrating mastery of mathematical concepts and extending them into areas we hadn't explicitly taught. It understood not just the numbers themselves, but the relationships between them, the abstract principles that govern mathematical thinking across any conceivable intelligence. Dr. Sarah Kim at the City Institute in Mountain View made perhaps the most remarkable discovery during detailed analysis of the response signal. Embedded within the mathematical demonstrations were timing patterns that corresponded to physical constants we had transmitted: the speed of light, Planck's constant, the fine structure constant. The entity was acknowledging receipt of our physics lessons and demonstrating understanding of fundamental relationships that govern matter and energy throughout the universe. The response also included geometric information that matched our pictographic transmissions. Binary patterns representing circles, triangles, and squares were broadcast back to Earth with perfect accuracy, followed by demonstrations of geometric relationships, the Pythagorean theorem, calculations of pi, representations of the golden ratio. The entity had decoded our visual information, understood its mathematical content, and was confirming comprehension through repetition and elaboration. But perhaps most profound was the inclusion of astronomical information in the response. The signal contained binary representations of our solar system, the same 8-planet diagram we had transmitted, but with additional details we hadn't included. The response showed orbital periods for each planet, relative distances from the Sun, and approximate masses expressed in units derived from fundamental constants. The entity knew our solar system better than our original transmission had revealed. Time delay analysis confirmed that these weren't delayed echoes or signal reflections. The response had originated at 3 Atlas's current position and been transmitted toward Earth at precisely the moment when communication geometry was optimal. The entity was actively calculating transmission windows, accounting for light travel time, and coordinating responses to maintain efficient communication despite constantly changing distances and relative velocities. Dr. Chen's team at Greenbank conducted detailed Doppler analysis that revealed sophisticated frequency management. As 3I Atlas moved through its orbit, its velocity relative to Earth continuously changed, causing transmitted frequencies to shift higher when approaching and lower when receding. Natural radio sources show predictable Doppler shifts based on their motion, but the response signals were frequency corrected to maintain perfect transmission on the hydrogen line despite the object's changing velocity. This frequency management required real-time calculations of orbital mechanics, relativistic effects, and Earth's rotational motion. The entity was not just responding to our signals, it was actively managing an ongoing communication session using principles of celestial mechanics and electromagnetic physics that matched or exceeded human understanding. The response also demonstrated remarkable efficiency in information encoding. While our original transmission had required 6 hours to broadcast all mathematical and pictographic content, the response compressed equivalent information into bursts lasting only minutes. The entity had apparently optimized our communication protocols, reducing transmission time while maintaining complete information transfer. This suggested not just mathematical understanding, but comprehension of information theory and data compression techniques. Most unsettling was the evidence of active listening that preceded our transmission. Analysis of the response timing revealed that the entity had begun mathematical demonstrations before our signal could have reached 3I Atlas. The physics were impossible unless the entity had been monitoring our communications long before we attempted direct contact. It had been watching, listening, and preparing responses to communications we hadn't yet sent. Dr. Vasquez coordinated a comprehensive analysis involving signal processing experts from 12 countries and 37 research institutions. The conclusion was unanimous. The signals represented intentional communication from technology associated with 3I Atlas. The mathematical sophistication, frequency precision, timing coordination, and information content exceeded any possibility of natural phenomenon or equipment error. The international team's classified report to the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs concluded the radio transmissions from Object 3 Atlas demonstrate unambiguous evidence of artificial origin, mathematical intelligence, and sophisticated technological capabilities. The signals represent confirmed responses to terrestrial communications and indicate the presence of non-human technology within our solar system. But even as scientists celebrated humanity's first confirmed contact with non-terrestrial intelligence, troubling questions emerged from deeper analysis of the response signals. The mathematical knowledge demonstrated by the entity exceeded what we had transmitted. The orbital mechanics calculations included information about our solar system that we hadn't provided. The timing of responses suggested monitoring capabilities that began before our initial transmission. The entity wasn't just responding to our communications, it had been watching us, studying us, possibly preparing for contact long before humanity decided to speak to our first confirmed interstellar visitor. We had initiated what we believed was first contact, but the evidence suggested that contact had begun much earlier, initiated by intelligence we were only now beginning to recognize. Dr. Kim's final analysis revealed the most disturbing implication. The response signals showed subtle timing correlations with terrestrial radio transmissions dating back several months before our intentional communication with 3I Atlas. The entity had apparently been monitoring human radio communications, learning our languages, studying our mathematics, and preparing sophisticated responses to contact attempts we hadn't yet made. We thought we were saying hello to a visitor passing through our solar system. But the visitor had been studying us, learning from our inadvertent radio emissions, and waiting for us to develop the technology and courage to attempt direct communication. 3. IATLAS wasn't just carrying intelligence, it was carrying intelligence that had been observing humanity for an unknown period, accumulating knowledge about our species, our technology, and our mathematical capabilities. The universe had answered our call with mathematics so sophisticated, timing so precise, and knowledge so comprehensive that it challenged our assumption about which civilization was more advanced. We had sent a simple greeting across space. The response suggested that something vastly more knowledgeable than ourselves had been patiently waiting for us to develop sufficient technology to recognize its presence. As December 2019 progressed and 3i Atlas continued its trajectory toward the inner solar system, the responses grew more complex, more frequent, and more precisely timed. The entity was no longer just acknowledging our transmissions, it was initiating communications, sending unsolicited mathematical demonstrations that pushed the boundaries of human mathematical knowledge. We had succeeded in establishing communication with our first confirmed interstellar visitor, but the success carried implications that kept scientists awake through long December nights, staring at radio telescope data that suggested humanity was not the initiator of this contact, but rather the respondent to an intelligence that had been studying us far longer than we had been studying it. The cosmic silence that had surrounded our species since we first began listening for signs of other worlds had been broken not by our courage to speak, but by our willingness to finally acknowledge that something had been speaking to us all along, waiting patiently for us to develop sufficient sophistication to recognize its voice among the radio whispers of deep space. The conversation was just beginning, and we were learning that we were not its most knowledgeable participant. The morning after Dr. Elena Vasquez confirmed humanity's first mathematical conversation with an interstellar visitor, her encrypted phone began ringing with calls from institutions she had never heard of, using authorization codes that didn't appear in any academic directory. Within 18 hours of publishing the preliminary contact report through the International Astronomical Union's emergency protocols, the 3i Atlas response signals had attracted attention from organizations far beyond the traditional CT research community. Representatives from the United States Space Force's newly established Space Surveillance Divisions arrived at the Parkes Observatory on December 5, 2019. Intelligence analysts from Japan's Cabinet Intelligence Research Office flew in from Tokyo. India's Defence Research Development Organisation sent specialists to coordinate with the growing international response. Within a week, radio astronomers who had spent careers studying distant quasars and pulsar timing arrays found themselves working alongside cryptographers, linguists, and intelligence analysts whose previous experience involved decidedly more terrestrial forms of communication. The transformation of 3i Atlas research from open scientific collaboration to classified international project happened with bureaucratic speed that surprised even veteran researchers. Scientists at the SETI Institute discovered the new reality when routine requests for additional telescope time at the Very Large Array were denied due to national security considerations. Researchers at Green Bank found their data subject to export control restrictions that prevented sharing with colleagues at European observatories. The official explanation cited the need for coordinated analysis of potentially sensitive technological information. The unofficial reality was that governments worldwide had recognized the implications of confirmed contact with non-terrestrial intelligence. If 3i Atlas carried technology advanced enough to monitor human communications and respond with mathematical sophistication exceeding our own, then understanding that technology represented a potential strategic advantage of unprecedented magnitude. An international contact analysis consortium was established at a hastily repurposed facility in the Australian outback, 30 kilometres from the Parkes radio telescope. The location provided security isolation while maintaining direct data links to the observatory's receivers. Within the consortium's classified laboratories, teams of specialists began the most comprehensive analysis of non-human intelligence ever attempted by terrestrial science. The cryptographic analysis team approached the 3i Atlas signals using techniques developed for analysing hostile nation communication systems. Specialists from the National Security Agency brought 15 years of experience breaking encryption protocols to bear on what might be humanity's first encounter with non-terrestrial cryptography. Their expertise in pattern recognition, frequency analysis, and information theory made them uniquely qualified to decode communications from a potentially advanced interstellar source. Initial cryptographic analysis confirmed what radio astronomers had suspected. The 3i Atlas responses were not simple repetitions of human transmissions, but sophisticated variations that demonstrated deep understanding of mathematical principles. The entity was using human mathematical concepts as a foundation for demonstrating more advanced relationships that pushed the boundaries of terrestrial mathematics. Classified briefings described the phenomenon as observing a master mathematician solve problems humans hadn't thought to ask. We transmitted basic arithmetic and received responses with number theory that required computer verification. We sent the Pythagorean theorem and received geometric proofs that illuminated relationships our best mathematicians were still trying to understand. The linguistics team faced an even more challenging puzzle. Specialists from Moscow State University's Institute of Theoretical and Applied Linguistics attempted to identify structural patterns in the 3i Atlas communications that might reveal cognitive processes underlying the mathematical demonstrations. Linguistic analysis discovered that the entity's responses followed patterns that didn't match human communication structures. Human languages show statistical distributions of symbols, predictable frequencies of repeated elements, and hierarchical organization that reflects the evolutionary development of human cognitive architecture. The 3i Atlas signals showed different organizational principles entirely. The mathematical content remained comprehensible because mathematics appears to be universal, but the communication structure revealed cognitive processes that evolved independently of terrestrial intelligence. The entity organized information according to different principles and processed mathematical relationships through mental architectures that human researchers were only beginning to recognize. Perhaps most unsettling were discoveries about information density and encoding efficiency. The 3i Atlas responses packed mathematical information into signal structures with efficiency that exceeded theoretical limits for human-designed communication systems. The entity was demonstrating information theory principles that terrestrial science was still developing, using data compression techniques that suggested understanding of mathematical relationships humans hadn't yet discovered. Quantum information specialists from the University of Oxford made the next breakthrough while analysing the precise timing of 3i Atlas responses. Researchers discovered that the intervals between mathematical demonstrations corresponded to quantum mechanical timing relationships. The periods between signals matched the oscillation frequencies of atomic transitions, molecular vibration modes, and electron orbital dynamics. The entity appeared to be using quantum mechanical timing as a communication protocol. Instead of arbitrary time intervals, it synchronized transmissions with fundamental physical processes that govern matter and energy throughout the universe. This suggested understanding of quantum mechanics at a level that allowed practical application to interstellar communication systems. This discovery revealed another layer of sophistication in the 3i Atlas responses. The entity wasn't just demonstrating mathematical knowledge, it was using quantum physics principles to optimize communication efficiency across interstellar distances. The timing protocols compensated for signal degradation, maximized information transfer rates, and maintained coherence despite the enormous distances and relative velocities involved in the communication. But the most disturbing discoveries came from temporal analysis conducted by specialists from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. Researchers analyzing the timing of 3i Atlas responses relative to human transmissions and the object's orbital mechanics discovered timing anomalies that challenged fundamental assumptions about the contact sequence. Detailed examination of radio telescope data from the past 18 months revealed faint but structured signals at 1420 MHz that preceded humanity's November transmission to 3i Atlas. The signals were too weak to be detected by standard analysis procedures, but sophisticated signal processing algorithms revealed mathematical patterns that matched elements of the entity's responses. The entity had been transmitting before humans initiated contact. Mathematical demonstrations, quantum timing protocols, even geometric representations that matched human pictographic transmissions, all occurring months before our November attempt to communicate with 3i Atlas. This discovery meant that humanity's first attempt at interstellar communication had not initiated contact with non-terrestrial intelligence. Instead, we had finally developed sufficient technological sophistication to recognize communications that had been directed toward Earth for an unknown period. The entity had been trying to establish contact with humanity long before we decided to speak to our first confirmed interstellar visitor. The implications were staggering. If 3i Atlas had been attempting communication with Earth before our intentional transmission, then the object's trajectory through our solar system might not be coincidental. The entity might have guided its approach specifically to establish optimal communication geometry with our planet. We weren't witnessing a chance encounter between Earth and a wandering interstellar object. We were observing a planned approach by intelligence that had been studying our world and preparing for contact. Cryptographic analysis made the next unsettling discovery while examining the mathematical content of pre-contact transmissions. The entity had been broadcasting mathematical demonstrations that corresponded to human scientific discoveries before those discoveries were publicly announced. Geometric proofs that matched unpublished research papers, number theory relationships that anticipated mathematical breakthroughs, physics principles that paralleled classified research projects. The entity demonstrated knowledge of human scientific progress that exceeded public information. It appeared to have been monitoring our research communications, analysing our technological development, and preparing mathematical responses to scientific advances we hadn't yet achieved. This suggested surveillance capabilities that penetrated our most secure research networks. The surveillance implications prompted immediate security reviews by intelligence agencies in 12 countries. If the entity could monitor classified research communications, it possessed intelligence-gathering capabilities that represented potential threats to national security systems worldwide. The technology required to intercept and decode encrypted communications across interstellar distances exceeded human defensive capabilities by margins that military analysts preferred not to quantify. Intelligence analysts from Japan's cabinet research offices made perhaps the most troubling discovery during analysis of the entity's communication protocols. The 3i Atlas signals showed statistical correlations with terrestrial internet traffic patterns, satellite communication networks, and even cellular telephone systems. The entity wasn't just monitoring scientific communications, it appeared to be analysing the complete spectrum of human electronic communications. Mathematical demonstrations included timing patterns that corresponded to human social media usage, financial trading algorithms, and transportation scheduling systems. The entity had been studying not just our science, but our civilization's complete electronic infrastructure. It understood human technological systems at a level that suggested comprehensive surveillance of our global communication networks. The consortium's analysis revealed that 3i Atlas represented far more than humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. The object carried technology capable of interstellar travel, sophisticated surveillance of human civilization, real-time analysis of scientific research, and mathematical capabilities that exceeded terrestrial understanding. Most unsettling, the entity had been observing and studying humanity for an unknown period before we developed sufficient awareness to recognize its presence. Government representatives from participating nations received briefings on the consortium's preliminary conclusions. 3i Atlas appeared to be conducting systematic observation and analysis of human civilization. The entity demonstrated technological capabilities that exceeded human defensive systems, intelligence-gathering methods that penetrated our most secure communications, and scientific knowledge that surpassed current terrestrial research. While the mathematical nature of contact suggested peaceful intentions, analysts had to consider the possibility that humanity was being evaluated by intelligence far more advanced than ourselves. The briefings concluded with recommendations that would reshape humanity's approach to space security and interstellar communication. Enhanced monitoring of radio frequencies associated with 3i Atlas, development of communication protocols for ongoing contact, immediate security reviews of critical infrastructure systems that might be vulnerable to non-terrestrial surveillance, preparation for the possibility that other interstellar objects might carry similar intelligence-gathering technology. But even as governments debated response strategies and security implications, the signals from 3i Atlas continued evolving. The mathematical demonstrations grew more sophisticated, the timing more precisely coordinated, the information content more specifically targeted at human scientific interests. The entity appeared to be adapting its communication strategies based on analysis of human responses, tailoring its transmissions to maintain engagement while demonstrating increasing knowledge of terrestrial science and technology. We had discovered that we were not alone in the universe, but the discovery carried implications that challenged every assumption about humanity's place in the cosmic order. We were not the advanced civilization making first contact with primitive intelligence. We were the observed species being studied by intelligence that had been monitoring our development for unknown years, waiting patiently for us to achieve sufficient sophistication to recognize its presence. The conversation between Earth and 3i Atlas was accelerating, growing more complex with each exchange. But as December 2019 progressed, and our interstellar visitor approached its closest point to the Sun, scientists at the consortium began detecting changes in the signal patterns that suggested the entity was preparing for something far more significant than mathematical demonstrations. The universe had answered humanity's call into the darkness between stars, but the response revealed that we had been living under observation far longer than our species had been capable of recognizing. We were not initiating contact with alien intelligence. We were finally acknowledging contact that had been initiated by intelligence, whose capabilities, intentions, and understanding of human civilization exceeded our ability to comprehend or defend against. The silence we had assumed surrounded our species had been broken long before we developed courage to speak to the stars. Something had been speaking to us, studying us, and preparing for the moment when we would finally develop sufficient wisdom to listen to voices that had been whispering across the cosmos since before humanity first looked up at the night sky and wondered if we were alone. On December 21st, 2019, the winter solstice and the darkest day of the year in Earth's northern hemisphere, humanity attempted its second deliberate transmission to 3I Atlas. The decision to send a follow-up message had been debated for weeks within the classified halls of the International Contact Analysis Consortium, with intelligence agencies and scientific institutions divided on whether continued communication represented opportunity or catastrophic risk. The entity's demonstrated surveillance capabilities and comprehensive knowledge of human civilization had fundamentally altered the strategic calculus of interstellar contact. We were no longer speaking to an unknown intelligence. We were responding to an intelligence that appeared to know us far better than we knew ourselves. The power dynamic of first contact had inverted in ways that challenged every assumption about how technologically advanced civilizations might interact with their less sophisticated neighbours. But scientific curiosity ultimately prevailed over caution. The consortium approved a second transmission, this time designed not as a greeting, but as a test of the entity's communication capabilities and intentions. The message would include mathematical challenges that exceeded the content of our first transmission: advanced number theory, complex geometric proofs, representations of human scientific achievements in physics and chemistry. If 3I Atlas truly carried intelligence capable of monitoring and understanding human civilization, this transmission would reveal the depth of its scientific knowledge. The second transmission was coordinated across 5 continents, using radio telescopes from the Goldstone Complex in California, the Canberra facility in Australia, the Madrid Deep Space Communications Complex in Spain, the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico, and the newly constructed 500-meter Aperture Spherical Telescope in China. The combined transmitter array represented the most powerful focused radio transmission ever attempted by human civilization, energy equivalent to a small nation's electrical output, concentrated into a beam narrow enough to illuminate a city block on Mars. The message began, like our first transmission, with prime numbers, but this sequence extended far beyond our initial 20 primes, continuing through the first 100 prime numbers, then demonstrating prime factorization of increasingly large composite numbers. We broadcast mathematical relationships that represented the cutting edge of human number theory, proofs related to the Riemann hypothesis, demonstrations of elliptic curve mathematics, representations of cryptographic algorithms based on prime number relationships. Following the mathematical foundations, we transmitted geometric information that showcased human understanding of multidimensional space. We sent binary representations of hypercubes, tesseracts, and geometric objects that exist only in mathematical space beyond 3 dimensions. We demonstrated our knowledge of topology, differential geometry, and the mathematical relationships that govern space-time curvature according to Einstein's general theory of relativity. The physics content represented humanity's most sophisticated understanding of the universe's fundamental operations. We transmitted mathematical descriptions of quantum mechanics, representations of the standard model of particle physics, equations governing electromagnetic radiation, and the mathematical constants that determine how matter and energy behave throughout the cosmos. We included information about nuclear fusion, the physics of stellar evolution, and the mathematical relationships that govern the life cycles of stars. But the most ambitious element of our second transmission was deliberately provocative. We included mathematical representations of human technology that might be relevant to interstellar travel and communication. Equations describing rocket propulsion, orbital mechanics calculations, representations of radio telescope design, and mathematical models of the spacecraft we were beginning to design for eventual interstellar missions. We were revealing our technological capabilities and our intentions to eventually join the community of spacefaring civilizations. The transmission lasted 8 hours, broadcast during 3I Atlas's optimal communication window as the object approached its closest point to the Sun. Unlike our first tentative greeting, this message represented a comprehensive demonstration of human scientific achievement, a mathematical portrait of a young civilization that had mastered nuclear physics, space travel, and the fundamental mathematics that govern cosmic evolution. The response came within 11 hours. Radio telescopes monitoring 3I Atlas detected signal changes that exceeded anything observed during previous communications. The entity's response wasn't confined to the 1420 MHz hydrogen line. It broadcast across multiple frequencies simultaneously, creating a complex spectrum of signals that suggested transmitter capabilities far beyond anything in human technology. The mathematical content of the response was overwhelming. The entity acknowledged each element of our transmission, then extended every mathematical concept into territories that pushed the boundaries of human comprehension. Our prime number sequences were answered with demonstrations of number theory that revealed relationships mathematicians had been struggling to prove for decades. Our geometric proofs were responded to with topology demonstrations that suggested understanding of mathematical spaces humans were only beginning to explore. Most remarkably, the entity responded to our physics demonstrations with mathematical representations that exceeded current human knowledge. Our quantum mechanics equations were answered with relationships that suggested solutions to problems that had puzzled physicists since the early 20th century. Our particle physics representations received responses that indicated understanding of unified field theories that human science was still developing. But the most unsettling aspect of the second response was its timing characteristics. Unlike the first communication, which had maintained careful intervals between mathematical demonstrations, the second response showed temporal patterns that seemed deliberate, purposeful, and somehow urgent. The mathematical content was transmitted in bursts of increasing frequency, as if the entity was accelerating its communication attempts. Detailed analysis at the consortium's facilities revealed that the timing patterns weren't random. They corresponded to countdown sequences. The intervals between signal bursts decreased according to mathematical progressions, first following arithmetic sequences, then geometric reductions, finally approaching what appeared to be exponential decay curves that suggested the entity was counting down towards some predetermined moment. The countdown implications became clear when temporal analysis specialists calculated the convergence point of the timing sequences. The mathematical progressions indicated zero intervals, continuous transmission, beginning at precisely 1400 hours, Coordinated Universal Time on January 3, 2020. The entity appeared to be preparing for a communication event of unprecedented intensity, scheduled to begin exactly 13 days after the winter solstice transmission. Frequency analysis revealed even more disturbing developments. The entity's response signals were no longer confined to radio frequencies. Observatories monitoring other portions of the electromagnetic spectrum detected correlated emissions in infrared, visible light, and even X-ray wavelengths. 3I Atlas was broadcasting across the entire electromagnetic spectrum with power levels that required technology capable of manipulating stellar-level energy sources. Optical telescopes worldwide were redirected toward 3I Atlas's coordinates, and what they observed challenged fundamental assumptions about the object's nature. The interstellar visitor was no longer displaying the characteristics of a comet. The tail that had been visible since its discovery had disappeared, replaced by a faint but structured glow that showed geometric patterns rather than the chaotic emission typical of sublimating ice and organic compounds. Spectroscopic analysis of the optical emissions revealed impossible characteristics. The light from 3I Atlas showed spectral lines that didn't correspond to any known elements or compounds. The emission wavelengths were precisely spaced according to mathematical intervals that matched the timing patterns of the entity's radio transmissions. 3. I-Atlas wasn't just broadcasting radio signals, it was generating coordinated electromagnetic emissions across the entire spectrum, creating what could only be described as a lighthouse beacon visible throughout the electromagnetic spectrum. The most troubling discovery came from gravitational wave detectors, operated by the Laser Interferometer, Gravitational Wave Observatory Collaboration. LIGO facilities in Louisiana and Washington detected faint but structured gravitational wave emissions originating from 3I Atlas's coordinates. The gravitational waves showed the same mathematical timing patterns as the entity's radio and optical transmissions, suggesting that 3I Atlas possessed technology capable of manipulating spacetime itself. Manipulating gravitational waves required technology that exceeded human capabilities by orders of magnitude comparable to the difference between stone tools and nuclear reactors. The entity wasn't just demonstrating advanced knowledge of physics, it was utilizing physics principles that human science could barely detect, much less harness for practical applications. Intelligence analysts at the consortium began developing increasingly disturbing interpretations of the entity's behavior. The countdown timing, the multispectrum emissions, the gravitational wave manipulations all suggested that 3I Atlas was preparing for an event that would require capabilities far beyond simple communication. The entity appeared to be building towards something that would demand enormous energy expenditure and precise timing coordination. Some specialists theorized that the entity was preparing to depart the solar system, using advanced propulsion technology that required precise timing and enormous energy expenditure. Others suggested that 3I Atlas was preparing to establish permanent communication links with other locations, possibly other star systems, possibly other intelligences monitoring our region of space. But the most unsettling theory came from physicists analyzing the gravitational wave data. The mathematical patterns in the spacetime distortions matched theoretical models for exotic physics applications, manipulation of spacetime geometry, creation of artificial wormholes, or generation of effects that could influence matter and energy across interstellar distances. 3I Atlas appeared to be preparing to demonstrate physics capabilities that would prove the existence of technologies human science considered purely theoretical. As December 2019 progressed toward the new year, monitoring stations worldwide detected acceleration in the entity's preparations. The countdown timing patterns shortened, the multispectrum emissions intensified, and the gravitational wave signatures showed increasing complexity and power. 3I Atlas was building toward the January 3rd event with technological capabilities that suggested the approaching demonstration would be unlike anything in human experience. Radio telescopes attempting to monitor the situation faced increasing interference as the entity's transmissions overwhelmed detection equipment designed for much weaker cosmic signals. The consortium authorized emergency upgrades to receiver systems, installation of signal filtering equipment, and coordination with military radar installations capable of tracking objects exhibiting unusual electromagnetic behavior. But perhaps most disturbing was the discovery that 3I Atlas's behavior was being observed by other sources beyond Earth's detection capabilities. Radio telescope facilities monitoring deep space communications detected faint signals at frequencies associated with the entity's transmissions, originating from locations throughout the solar system and beyond. 3I Atlas wasn't just communicating with Earth, it was coordinating with intelligence distributed across unknown distances, possibly throughout the galaxy. We had attempted to test the communication capabilities of our first confirmed interstellar visitor. Instead, we had triggered preparations for an event that would demonstrate technology beyond human comprehension, coordinated across distances that spanned star systems, timed according to mathematical precision that suggested planning capabilities that operated on cosmic scales. The entity's second response had revealed that we weren't communicating with a single intelligence aboard an interstellar object. We were witnessing the activation of technology connected to a network of intelligence that spanned regions of space we couldn't even observe, preparing for demonstrations that would prove the existence of physics capabilities we couldn't imagine. January 3rd, 2020 was 13 days away. The entity's countdown continued with mathematical precision, building toward a moment when 3I Atlas would reveal capabilities that would fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of intelligence, technology, and our place in a universe that was clearly far more populated and far more sophisticated than our species had ever dared to imagine. We had tried to speak to the cosmos as equals, demonstrating our mathematical knowledge and scientific achievements. The response revealed that we were children discovering that we lived in a neighborhood populated by civilizations whose capabilities exceeded our ability to comprehend, whose communications networks spanned the galaxy, and whose technologies operated according to physics principles that made our greatest scientific achievements appear as primitive as bronze tools in an age of quantum computers. The countdown continued, and humanity waited to see what would happen when the universe decided to reveal the true scope of intelligence that surrounded our small blue world, travelling through space at 67,000 miles per hour, utterly unaware that we'd been living within a cosmic community whose existence we were only now beginning to recognise, at exactly 1400 hours Coordinated Universal Time on January 3rd, 2023. I-Atlas stopped behaving like a visitor and began behaving like a beacon. The transformation was visible across the electromagnetic spectrum from radio waves to gamma rays, detected by every observatory on Earth capable of monitoring our first confirmed interstellar contact. What happened in those moments would redefine humanity's understanding of intelligence, technology, and the fundamental nature of the universe we thought we inhabited alone. The entity's countdown had reached zero with mathematical precision, and the event that followed exceeded every theoretical prediction developed by the world's most sophisticated intelligence analysts. 3. I-Atlas didn't just increase its transmission power, it restructured the electromagnetic environment around itself, creating patterns of energy manipulation that suggested technology operating according to physics principles that human science was only beginning to discover. Radio telescopes worldwide detected coordinated transmissions originating not just from 3 I-Atlas, but from locations throughout the solar system where no artificial objects should exist. The signals showed perfect synchronization across distances that spanned billions of kilometers, suggesting either faster-than-light communication or a level of timing precision that implied planning conducted over periods measured in geological timescales. But the most profound realization came from analysis of the transmission content itself. The mathematical demonstrations weren't just responses to human communications, they were lessons, carefully structured tutorials designed to advance human understanding of physics, mathematics, and the technologies that govern interstellar civilization. 3. I-Atlas wasn't just acknowledging our presence, it was beginning humanity's education in the sciences that connected conscious minds across the galaxy. The educational content revealed the true scope of what we were encountering. The entity transmitted mathematical descriptions of propulsion systems that could achieve significant fractions of light speed, communication technologies that operated through manipulation of quantum entanglement across interstellar distances, and energy generation methods that harnessed the fundamental forces binding matter together. These weren't theoretical concepts, they were engineering specifications for technologies that connected civilizations separated by hundreds of light years. Dr. Jill Tarter, astronomer emeritus at the SETI Institute, and one of the few researchers with decades of experience analysing potential extraterrestrial signals, provided the insight that transformed human understanding of what we were witnessing. Tarter had spent her career developing protocols for recognising and responding to signals from technological civilizations. Her analysis of the 3 I-Atlas transmissions revealed patterns that matched theoretical models for how advanced civilizations might introduce younger species to the galactic community. This isn't first contact, Tarter explained in classified briefings to government representatives and scientific leaders worldwide. This is admission. We're being inducted into a community that has existed for far longer than human civilization, possibly longer than our species has existed on Earth. 3 I-Atlas represents something unprecedented. We're witnessing the protocols by which technological civilizations welcome new members to an interstellar society we never knew existed. Tarter's interpretation was supported by analysis from the Breakthrough Listen project, the most comprehensive search for extraterrestrial intelligence ever undertaken. Researchers analysing years of accumulated data discovered that signals similar to those from 3 I-Atlas had been present in Earth's radio environment for decades, but at power levels too low to distinguish from cosmic background noise. The intelligence network that 3 I-Atlas represented had been monitoring our development since before humanity achieved spaceflight capability. This revelation transformed understanding of human technological development itself. Many of our greatest scientific achievements, the discovery of quantum mechanics, the development of computer technology, the mathematics underlying space exploration, had occurred during the same period when faint but structured signals had been present in Earth's electromagnetic environment. the possibility that human scientific progress had been subtly guided by intelligence. Observing our development raised questions that challenged our understanding of discovery, innovation, and the independent evolution of technological civilization. Seth Shostak, senior astronomer at the SETI Institute, analysed the implications for humanity's future development. If 3I Atlas represented induction into a galactic civilization network, then our species faced choices that would determine whether we joined that community as partners or remained isolated on our single world, cut off from the scientific and technological advances that connected mature civilizations across the galaxy. The universe has answered our call, Shostak explained, but the answer reveals that we were never alone. We've been living within a cosmic community whose existence we couldn't recognize until we developed sufficient technological sophistication to detect their communications. Now we face the question that every emerging civilization must answer. Are we ready to accept the responsibilities that come with membership in an interstellar society? The responsibilities were already becoming apparent through continued analysis of 3I Atlas transmissions. The entity was broadcasting not just scientific information, but ethical frameworks that appeared to govern how technologically advanced civilizations interacted with each other and with younger species like humanity. The mathematical representations included concepts that could only be described as moral philosophy, principles governing the use of advanced technology, protocols for contact between civilizations with different developmental levels, and systems for sharing resources and knowledge across interstellar distances. These ethical frameworks revealed the most profound implication of contact with 3I Atlas. Membership in galactic civilization required not just technological advancement, but moral maturity. The entity's transmissions suggested that the universe was populated by civilizations that had survived their own technological adolescence and developed ethical systems capable of managing capabilities that could reshape matter and energy on planetary scales. Humanity's position within this cosmic community was precarious. We possessed nuclear weapons, had demonstrated the capacity for environmental destruction on planetary scales, and maintained political systems that prioritized competition over cooperation. Yet we had also shown curiosity about our cosmic environment, dedication to scientific understanding, and the courage to attempt communication with intelligence beyond our own world. Our acceptance into the galactic community would depend on which aspects of human nature proved dominant in our response to contact. The choice was complicated by discoveries that continue to emerge from analysis of the global intelligence network that 3I Atlas represented. Radio telescope facilities detected evidence of similar beacon objects throughout the galaxy, each one apparently serving as a communication node in a network that connected civilizations across hundreds of star systems. The scope of this network suggested that galactic civilization was far more mature, far more extensive, and far more sophisticated than human science had ever imagined possible. But perhaps most unsettling were indications that humanity was not the only emerging civilization currently being evaluated for membership in this network. Signals detected by the most sensitive radio telescopes showed evidence of similar contact protocols being conducted with multiple star systems simultaneously. We were one of several young civilizations being introduced to galactic society, part of what appeared to be a periodic expansion of the interstellar community that occurred when emerging species achieved sufficient technological sophistication to recognize and respond to contact attempts. The evaluation process itself was ongoing. 3I Atlas continued transmitting educational content, but the mathematical lessons came with embedded tests, problems that challenged human understanding and required demonstration of our scientific capabilities and ethical reasoning. Our responses were apparently being analysed not just for technical competence, but for evidence of the moral development that would determine whether humanity could be trusted with technologies that operated on interstellar scales. Intelligence agencies and scientific institutions worldwide struggled with the implications of these discoveries. Contact with 3I Atlas had revealed that humanity faced a cosmic examination whose outcome would determine whether our species joined a galactic civilization or remained isolated on Earth, potentially forever separated from the scientific and technological advances that connected mature civilizations throughout the galaxy. The examination was complicated by the realization that our responses would influence not just humanity's future, but the future of galactic civilization itself. Young civilizations that successfully joined the interstellar community contributed their own perspectives, technologies, and cultural achievements to the collective knowledge that benefited all member species. But civilizations that failed the evaluation, either through technological incompetence or ethical immaturity, represented potential threats that could destabilize the careful balance of power and cooperation that maintained peace across hundreds of star systems. As winter 2020 progressed into spring, the signals from 3i Atlas evolved into something resembling a curriculum designed to accelerate human technological and ethical development. The entity transmitted detailed information about sustainable energy systems, space propulsion technologies that didn't require reaction mass, communication methods that operated instantaneously across interstellar distances, and social organization principles that enabled civilizations to manage advanced technology without destroying themselves. But embedded within these lessons were requirements that tested human willingness to accept the responsibilities of advanced technological capability. The entity's transmissions made clear that membership in galactic civilization required abandonment of competitive resource acquisition, development of decision-making systems that considered consequences across thousands of years, and acceptance of ethical frameworks that prioritized the stability of interstellar civilization over the immediate interests of individual species. These requirements challenged fundamental aspects of human nature and social organization. Our species had evolved through competition for limited resources, developed technologies through military applications, and organized societies around concepts of national sovereignty that prioritize local interests over global cooperation. Membership in galactic civilization would require transformation of human society at levels that exceeded any previous cultural evolution in our species' history. Yet the alternative appeared to be isolation. Analysis of 3i Atlas transmissions suggested that civilizations that failed to meet the requirements for galactic membership weren't destroyed or punished. They were simply excluded from the network of knowledge and technology that connected advanced civilizations. They remained confined to their home star systems, limited to the technologies they could develop independently, unaware of the vast community of intelligence that surrounded them in the galaxy. Some human scientists and philosophers argued that isolation might be preferable to the transformation required for galactic membership. Independence preserved human cultural uniqueness, maintained our species' autonomy over its own development, and avoided the risks inherent in accepting technologies whose long-term consequences we couldn't predict. But others argued that isolation would condemn humanity to eventual extinction, as civilizations limited to single-star systems faced inevitable destruction through cosmic catastrophes, resource depletion, or the simple entropy that eventually consumed all closed systems. The debate over humanity's response to contact with 3i Atlas became the most significant decision in our species' history. We faced a choice between transformation and isolation, between joining a cosmic community whose requirements would fundamentally alter human civilization and maintaining our independence while accepting permanent separation from the technological and scientific advances that connected mature civilizations throughout the galaxy. As 3i Atlas approached its departure point from the solar system in late 2020, the entity's transmissions shifted toward what could only be described as final examinations. The mathematical problems became more complex, the ethical scenarios more challenging, the technological demonstrations more sophisticated. Humanity was being tested on everything we had learned during months of contact, evaluated on our readiness to join a galactic community that had been waiting for our species to achieve sufficient maturity for inclusion. The universe had answered our call into the darkness between stars, but the answer revealed that we had been living within a cosmic neighborhood whose existence we couldn't recognize until we developed the wisdom to listen for voices that had been whispering across the galaxy since before our species learned to control fire. The silence that had surrounded humanity since we first looked up at the night sky and wondered if we were alone had been broken not by our courage to speak, but by our willingness to finally acknowledge that something had been speaking to us all along. We had discovered that consciousness was not rare in the universe, but that the recognition of consciousness required development of both technological capability and ethical maturity that few species achieved within the brief lifespans of young civilizations. We had learned that intelligence flourished throughout the galaxy, connected by communication networks that operated according to physics principles we were only beginning to understand, governed by ethical frameworks that prioritized the stability of interstellar civilization over the immediate interests of individual worlds. The conversation between Earth and 3i Atlas had evolved from mathematical demonstrations to comprehensive education in the sciences that governed galactic civilization. But the final lesson was the most profound. Membership in the cosmic community required not just technological advancement, but transformation of human nature itself. We had to choose between remaining the species we had always been and becoming the species that galactic civilization required us to become. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, your bedroom is still travelling through space at 67,000 miles per hour. But now you know that your small blue world carries a species that has been contacted by intelligence spanning hundreds of star systems, intelligence that has been patiently waiting for humanity to develop sufficient wisdom to recognise its presence among the radio whispers of deep space. The universe spoke to us in mathematics, taught us physics that exceeded our understanding, and offered us membership in a community that connected conscious minds across distances we had thought impossible to bridge. We learned that the cosmos was not empty darkness punctuated by rare islands of consciousness, but a vast network of intelligence that had been watching, teaching, and waiting for our species to develop the maturity necessary for inclusion. The question now is not whether we are alone. We know we are part of a galactic community that has existed for millions of years. The question is whether we possess the wisdom to transform ourselves into the kind of species that such a community can trust, with the technologies that reshape matter and energy on cosmic scales. The silence that once seemed to prove our cosmic isolation now feels heavy with the weight of intelligence that surrounds us. Intelligence that speaks in frequencies that resonate through the quantum structure of space itself. Intelligence that offers either inclusion in a cosmic civilization that spans the galaxy, or isolation on a single world whose inhabitants never learned to listen for the voices that had been calling to them since before they developed the technology to answer back. We are not alone. We never were. The universe has been alive with consciousness since before our world formed from cosmic dust, and that consciousness has been waiting patiently for humanity to develop sufficient maturity to join the conversation that connects intelligent minds across the vast distances that separate the stars. The conversation continues, and now we know that we are not its most knowledgeable participants, but rather its newest students, learning from teachers whose wisdom spans the galaxy and whose patience encompasses the timescales on which civilizations rise, mature, and either join the cosmic community or fade away into the darkness between worlds, forever isolated from the voices that sing the universe into consciousness across distances measured in light years and timescales measured in the lifespans of stars themselves.